Well, that means a compliment when somebody says straight from the horse's mouth. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the S3E8 episode, and today we're going to cover since you're seeing the thumbnail from your side as you're currently sitting in some comfortable coffee shop, library, gym, or whatever the fuck you are, you're seeing the reason whom I will be speaking to about in this video, and it's none other than Mr. Horseman from Prislonica, none other than Mr. I've done it everything and nothing bad in the club is my fault, blame somebody else and not me, Ostoja. Now, he's currently the director of the Partizan Belgrade and the CEO, if I may say so. I guess what he considers himself to be. And he recently had this interview in which he has described that nothing is of his fault, everything bad has gone to the basketball club of Partizan Belgrade. So in his recent interview, he blamed everything to people who were in charge and had nothing to do with him. So, but actually boils down to when it comes to his interview, he kind of said to a lot of people that he was responsible for the successes in the Partizan Belgrade, that he brought the money, and that if he had not given the money to the club would have shut down and it would have been going to some beton league or whatever the fuck, to the concrete league, where we will be hanging out with the raccoons, and the raccoons will be team mascots of the Partizan Belgrade, and everything would have crumbled and fallen down if it wasn't for our horsemen from the picture. Now, the reason that we're mentioning Ostoja in this context is because his hobbies, I guess, is riding horses, whatever the fuck he's doing in his spare time. And you can also ask Duško Krtola on Instagram why he's having issues when the profiles that are resembling horses are cussing out him in his DMs. I guess Krtola had some, contemplating about life if he needed this shit, but when you're supporting Partizan Belgrade, there are a lot of consequences and flaws. But anyway, into this opening interview in which the press, including Vladan Tigeltia, Edin Avdic, and some Volros guy. So they basically tried to ask a lot of, daring and minefield questions, the horseman, but Ostoja kind of refuted, and the interview basically boils down to him saying that everything's successful at Partizan done, winning the titles in ABA League and almost being close to the Final Four in the season of 2023. It's his accomplishments, and as I mentioned a couple of moments ago, if it had not been for his money and his famous or infamous, depending whom you ask, 2017 arrival in Partizan Belgrade, in which he claimed that he paid the salaries from the 2010s or 2011s, whatever the fuck that it was. But I like his profile in which he's claiming everything good for him and everything bad that is somebody else's fault, even though a lot of gravediggers, including myself, are going to conclude that even though he is a businessman, and he mentioned a lot of times in this interview that he's a proud patriot, that he went to Kosovo and that he was very loyal to his country, and he's a very horse-alike person who remembers things, and that he fought for Partizan, that he was just a businessman, and him including himself in the business game of Partizan Belgrade actually brought him a lot of criticism and controversial reactions, polarizing reactions to say it at least. But back to the point, so Ostoja mentioned in this interview that you can check, as I mentioned, that was hosted by Vladan Tigeltia and Edin Avdic, and the third guy I actually forgot, but he wasn't that important in the first place. Now, Edin and Tigeltia had tried to give Ostoja some uncomfortable questions, which a lot of businessmen are trying to avoid in Serbia, Sorabendia. But in Sorabendia, Ostoja is like he is a saint to our graveyard sinners, in which we the sinners are at fault because of the bad situation. Now, for somebody who is not in the nose or living on the rock or first time opening this channel, welcome, it's Blade Runner 2147. And what actually boils down to is that, my name is Stefan Heller, by the way. What actually boils down to is that his perception that claiming good and blaming bad. So as I mentioned, in this situation, prior to the departure of Željko Bradovic, the atmosphere was very intense and negative, hostile, Stockholm syndrome, whatever the fuck you want to call it, as gravediggers are very well aware of the situations they found themselves in. And in this case, the context, he blamed that Zoran Savic was in fault. And there has been this ongoing mystery, like a Twin Peaks X-Files rabbit hole of bringing players to the club without coach's consent, bringing players with coach's consent, or bringing players without sports director or coach's consent knowledge. So that story has been going back and forth for the past 3 years, and it has been really pissing me off. It's because every like those basketball managers, but what I mean, managers who are bringing players to EuroLeague in general, not just Partizan Belgrade, but like other clubs in Europe, and they always love to say, and this mystery about who is bringing players to Partizan Belgrade with or without coaches' consent has been really present in our society and in our atmosphere, if I may say so, in which different and numerous sources are claiming that syndrome, and they're pointing fingers at Željko Bradovic, Zoran Savic, or Ostoja, or the Horseman. And I find it difficult to believe that when they're presenting their arguments and they're saying like, Željko had no idea who was coming to the club, he is the one choosing players, but then the other sources are saying, even the other club included, no, Željko has no saying who is coming to Partizan Belgrade in his squad in his team, and that everything is like hearsay. And this hearsay has been one of the greatest viruses and detriments in not just for basketball but also in football, in which it's the same ongoing tragedy with hearsay: who has consent, which players have to play and which players don't have to play, and which players have to warm the bench, and which players are prevented from coming to play in the game and whatnot. And if you're already tired by me explaining this in circles, trust me, I've been hearing this bullshit when it comes to football for the past decade and plus. And for this, who is coming to basketball club with or without coach's consent, without sports director's consent, without director's knowledge, which is Ostoja, like the CEO, whatever the fuck he is in his position. And he keeps saying that he had no knowledge, and he gave this story in the interview in which he says that like he doesn't speak with Zoran Savic, and recently with Pop and Milan Kalinic, Rajnatovic, the sleaze guy scumbag, says that he spoke with Zoran Savic, but Ostoja said that either in that triangle, Bermuda Triangle between Savic, Ostoja, and Rajnatovic, the scumbag, it's a really convoluted story in which the two of them, in which Savic remained silent after his departure as a sports director from Partizan Belgrade. He has not uttered a single syllable or sentence about bringing players with or without consent or their knowledge, which is kind of schizophrenic in the first place. And as of right now, as I'm filming this video, I'm still expecting that Zoran Savic announces himself or goes to Pop and Kalinic, or he can just go to the same Tegeltia room and explain what happened in these, not just in previous summer, but previous summers as well, in which the same story of convoluted, and who brought players with or without coach's consent, sports director consent, director's consent, consent of the squad, consent of the other coaches and whatnot. And this problem has been really bugging Partizan Belgrade, but it's always I have to say, not just stroking cock in English, but šiljenje kurca on my club. It's because every shusha that comes to my club loves to give 2 cents of their humble opinions, if I may say so. But back to the horseman motherfucker at hand. So this horseman has been defending himself from some unknown defense when he wasn't attacked in the first place, in which he explains that his money brought status to the Partizan Belgrade from 2017 up until now as I'm making this video. So his main story, besides that everything is his success, what Partizan did positive in all the previous seasons that he was in club, and everything negative and bad and defeats and whatnot and tension and atmosphere and hostility and the entire situation, it's never his fault. It's always somebody else's. And when he was asked by whom was that somebody's fault, he usually gives convoluted answers, and he likes to say in between lines, like every politician and every businessman loves to do. Now, in this case, a context when you're chasing the answers from the horse's mouth, and the greatest phrase in English language, straight from the horse's mouth, but even from the horse's mouth, his answers are not that transparent, and his answers are not that revealing to the masses, because he has been hiding his political affiliation. And he also mentioned in the interview that like You can check on YouTube if you want. I can actually put the link in the description, in which Ostoja claims that when he was bringing players, it was to his knowledge that he was very vocal, even though to the incident between Lazarevic and Nanali, he remained silent, and in which every section and reference or the regime media was attacking Partizan Belgrade, whether it's football or basketball, but primarily basketball. When it comes to defending of Željko Bradovic, even Željko Bradovic had to fill in for the from the clueless Horseman Ostoja, because even Horseman Ostoja, as much as he claimed that from 2017 up until now, and I know I'm repeating 2017, but trust me, Ostoja inhales oxygen, he already mentions 2017. Ask him why, because we have no fucking idea why. Now, in which this political game, and I don't know personally, or for the gravediggers themselves, actually the normal ones, not the realni god, which I'm trying to vomit without mentioning their name. But the point is that we're trying to figure out the answers that are convoluted in this fog of politics, and Ostoja is trying to portray as if there is not like a invisible force hanging or looming beyond our stadium or Stark Arena or JNA or Rajko Mitic for the other club, that there is one entity which we shall not mention into this video, but we already know who the sick man is, the glass man, and that he is beyond everything. And a second ongoing argument has been going since 2021 when Željko Bradovic came back to Partizan Belgrade, is that hearsay and the rabbit hole and the Twin Peaks and the X-Files and the, trivia and scary pasta, whatever the fuck is, that Ostoja is saying that he brought Željko to the club, but Željko actually said in between the lines that it was his desire to come to the club after 30 some years. And there is a third negative, like a connotation in the horror hearsay from the other club fans, in which they're saying that it was consented by the Alhamdulillah of the state, and that if it wasn't for the Alhamdullah's consent, that Željko Bradovic would not come to the Partizan Belgrade. Now, as much as there are arguments and back and forth between the gravedigger groups in saying in which who was at fault and whatnot, Ostoja is playing the stupid game, and now he's saying all this patriotic stuff in which he mentioned that he went to Kosovo, as I mentioned at the beginning of my video, and that he is very loyal and that he is very transparent and straightforward in dealing in business, and that he kind of wasted time as I had to waste time to listen to his political bullshit and everything in between, because as I mentioned, he's a very snakish, and that he kind of avoiding the topic of the political affiliation in my country of Sorabendia, because in country of Sorabendia, unless you're not approved by the Alhamdulillah to do something in Sorabendia, you're gonna have like a very bureaucratic, stressful and put time in order for you to make something work in this NPC country. Now, the point is that I'm trying to make that in this case, the context, Ostoja's approach to this entire interview was very also condescending, especially to one of the greatest sport journalists called Edin Avdic. I mean, of course. And Edin Avdic has been recently fired, according to some rumors, whatever the fuck. And he's also very hated by the other club because he's bringing up the facts the same way Tegeltia owned Kalinic in the conversation. Apparently, when you're giving facts and truth to the people, you're spreading hatred, because FMP 2011, that never happened, and even if it happened, it's somebody else's club, and nobody can forbid the name of the club as the another sleazeball whom I will not mention his name, mentioned many years ago. So in this very intense situation, Juan Peñarroya was announced as the replacement for Željko Bradovic, and when Peñarroya came to Partizan Belgrade as the head coach of it, he was very demonized and very determined to be painted as the black devil of the coach. And that I think Peñarroya was aware that he was coming to the place in which he's going to be the victim of the circumstances that have transpired in Partizan Belgrade. But the ongoing pattern in any of the sports club, whether it's basketball or football, it's always the politics. They're gonna ruin the atmosphere, the dynamic, and whatever the fuck not. And it's always something in between, and it's always some forces that are preventing Partizan from actually flying like Icarus, just hoping not too close to the sun before he falls down. But the point is that in interview that was recently, between Ostoja, Tegeltia, Avdic, and the third guy, Ostoja kind of presented all the things that he considers that are real, which are actually not, in which he's claiming that his success is his determination and motivation to help Partizan Belgrade since 2017. And when he came to 2017, it was a very like a terrible state in which the economy, I mean, the infrastructure of the Partizan Belgrade is terrible, as I'm speaking, that everybody knows, and has been the same ongoing bullshit tale that I've been hearing for the past decade and a half from the either media sources or the sports sources from the horsemen or in Partizan Belgrade. Now, the problem is that I have is that when you're pretending that you're the saint among the sinners and that the sinners are at fault because they're chanting to your Alhamdulillah, because he's, I think, because his answer, if he is in the ruling party or not, is still shady or foggy or very rainy and foggy, as Hemingway described in one of his books. And we don't know if he is member or not, but that's not the point. The point is that he is oblivious either intentionally, but I cannot discredit and say that he doesn't know in which situation he is when it comes to Partizan Belgrade. You see, Partizan Belgrade in Sorabendia is politically prevented from winning anything, aside the handball in which we defeated like Red Star or whatever, and we won 2 trophies in the span of 2 weekends. But it's not just about the handball. The argument also goes online that every time Partizan wins in some sport, and if the other club is not included and they're not winning anything, they love to say nobody follows that sport or nobody cares. But if they were winning, it would have been like a different story. And what I always hated about the horseman from Prislonica is his willingness to play dead, one of the worst traits of a Serbian person that you're living in Sorabendia. When bad things happen, not just the example between like Naneli and the other scumbag, scumfuck, asshole, cocksucker of Lazarevic, when that had happened, he was utterly silent and he put his microphone on mute and he did not say anything, or nor the club was actually determined to publish anything or to say anything that it was a problem. And all this controversy about chanting something that it's not allowed in the sports, and that theme has been going on for the past decade and so, or even more than a decade, and it's always the same circle of hell in which we are repeating what we have repeated in the previous sections of conversation, the dialogue, and whatever the fuck not. So Oslonica, a guy in this interview, really presented himself as a very shady, lucrative contract person, in which paradoxically, oxymoronically, or sardonically, sarcastically, ironically, he presents himself as a person who is like a cognitive dissonance, in which he's actually aware of what is going on in the club, but also at the same time he's not aware what is going on at the club. And at the things he's not aware what's going on in the club, he likes to blame and point fingers towards either sports director, in which, as I mentioned like 10 minutes ago, Zoran Savic also has to address about this bullshit, because this bullshit has been following us ever since the arrival of Željko Obradović, and has been following us ever since the departure of Željko Obradović. Now, this ongoing feud and this Mexican-Spanish drama bullshit that always has to catch my club, even though I'm trying my best to follow it at the best of my interest. But as I'm trying to say that in this context, Ostoja has to someday be very transparent and to avoid this schizophrenic perception of him that he didn't know who was coming, that he is the director of something, and that he rarely spoke with Željko, and that they had distanced themselves. Now, this is according to Željko, that Ostoja actually distanced himself from the club, and that he rarely showed up to the locker room to give some motivational speeches. And he even said from the horse's mouth that a horseman actually came one time to locker room to give a speech and to introduce himself with the players, whatever the fuck that case is. But the ongoing issue is that this but the director is actually playing dead when it benefits him. When it's about the praises and the awards and whatever the fuck not of the positive spectrum, he is there to teleport in a split second of a traveling light in the universe. But when it comes to, the negative stuff and the negative feedback and things of that nature, when it comes to the club, he's going to be like a very ignorant and saying nothing to do with me, everything else is bad guys, and I'm just trying to lift Partizan Belgrade from its ashes. And it's a very ongoing feud between him and the fans, including myself, because we are severely getting pissed at everything that he is saying, that he said if it not had been for his money that he is serving as the businessman, the club would have fallen and fallen into some sort of false obscurity, and Partizan Belgrade would have returned to the same place he was before he came in 2017. I'm starting to ask for my mental health how many times I mentioned the fucking year of 2017. Never mind. Now, while finishing this video, I'm just going to say that you have to think about it, and if you're kind of confused and still not understanding the point of this video, is I'm trying to say that this business in Sorabendia, when it comes to Partizan Belgrade, it is so much convoluted and in between the lines and hearsay and hearsay, she say, it say, they say, say, whatever the fuck is. It has been going on for the past decade and a half, and Ostoy is just an accomplice. But he's kind of protected by the Alhamdulillah because he was appointed by the Alhamdulillah for him to be in the club. And as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, in Sorabendia, in order for a Partizan club to function, it has to be taken from the grip from the ruling party, because the ruling party is very hateful toward Partizan Belgrade. And I know people are going to say, especially the other club, copper collectors, they're going to say, well, gee, Alhamdulillah is giving you money for the past decade. You guys are a joke. You guys are ridiculous. Yeah, he's giving us money, but at the same time, he's also, putting us in a Stockholm Syndrome situation in which he's giving us money, and due to the incompetence of the football and basketball board, now we have to, I'm not counting basketball, apologies, I'm mentioning about the football. He has been giving us money. It's because our board, I'm not talking about Mijatovic, Rasim Ljajic, or Mrs. Milka Fortson, I'm talking about people underneath them in which they have been incompetent for so many years that it's very easy for the Alhamdulillah to give us money, where the board or the sports directors or people who should be, or when it comes to the economics themselves, they have to get rid of that shit and finally find a solution for us to get rid of Alhamdulillah once and for all. Because if Alhamdulillah keeps paying us, he can rise his dick of 2 centimeters someday and he can say, gee golly gee guys, I know I've paid you this money for so many years to protect you from going bankrupt and to be approved by UEFA. Guys, if you could give me my money back, I would be extremely happy. It's one of the possibilities, which I'm praying and hoping that never happens. So thank you for coming to this channel of Blade Runner 2147. My name is Stefan Heller. Apologies once again for this long venting, but I had to get it off my chest. Fuck Ostoja and his horseman bullshit methods that he's trying to say to us, the Gravedigger fans. We have to be straight edge. Fuck the system, fight within the system, and to tell them the Partizan Belgrade, as much as you're trying to bring us down, will never fall. And it has, because it has in it the most infamous or famous Serbian characteristics, or a spice in our food, in our identity, in which we have been having it for the past a lot of centuries. Until next time, have a great day. Christ is King, and remember, Partizan Belgrade and Chelsea, fuck the system, and Ostoja, go fuck yourself, you horse cocksucker.